The man standing in my kitchen looked embarrassed. He was probably in his early 30s. Nice clothes. Wedding ring. A little girl peeked from behind his leg holding a stuffed rabbit. "I'm really sorry," he repeated. "Are we at the wrong address?" I couldn't answer right away. My eyes stayed on the suitcase sitting beside my dining room table. Then his wife walked in, carrying 2 grocery bags. She smiled politely. "We booked 3 nights." Booked. 3 nights. I looked around my own house as if I'd somehow wandered into someone else's life. "I live here," I finally said. Both of them froze. The man slowly reached into his pocket. "I can show you the reservation." He opened an app. There was my house. The blue shutters. The maple tree Linda planted 26 years ago. The first Saturday in October, Ethan knocked on my front door. He didn't use the old access code. He didn't try the smart lock. He didn't walk in the way he had for years. He knocked. 3 quiet taps. When I opened the door, he stood there holding nothing but a paper bag from the bakery downtown. "No toolbox?" I asked. He smiled awkwardly. "I figured I'd wait until I was invited." For the first time in months, that simple sentence made me believe we still had a chance. "Come in." We sat on the back porch with coffee and cinnamon rolls. Neither of us rushed to fill the silence. The maple tree Linda had planted was beginning to turn red. Every autumn, she used to say the tree looked as if it remembered every season we'd spent together. I caught myself looking toward the empty chair beside me. Ethan noticed. "I still expect to see Mom there, too." I nodded. "So do I." After several minutes, he spoke. "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "The day you gave me the spare key." I smiled faintly. "You were 23. I just bought my first house. You were terrified of changing a light fixture." He laughed. "I was. You told me, 'Dad, what if something happens?' So I gave you a key." He looked down into his coffee. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot why you gave it to me." I didn't interrupt. "It wasn't so I could control your house. It was because you trusted me." The words hung between us. Trust, such a small word, so difficult to rebuild. A week later, he called again. "Dad, could you come to Noah's baseball game?" Of course. When I arrived, he waved me over instead of parking me in the bleachers by myself, like he'd started doing after Linda died. He introduced me to another father. "This is my dad." Not, "This is Charlie." Not, "He lives nearby." Just, "My dad." I hadn't realized how much I'd missed hearing those words. After the game, Noah climbed into my truck. "Grandpa?" "Yeah? Can I ask something?" "You always can." "Were you really mad at Dad?" Children have a way of asking the questions adults avoid. "I was hurt." "Are you still hurt?" I thought about it before answering. "A little." "Will it go away?" I smiled. "Only if we keep telling each other the truth." He nodded as though that made perfect sense. Maybe to children, it does. 2 weeks later, Lindsay asked if she could stop by. Alone. She looked nervous standing on my porch. "I don't expect forgiveness." "I know." "I only wanted to tell you something." We sat in the kitchen. She wrapped both hands around a coffee mug Linda had bought years ago. "I've been seeing a counselor." I looked at her. I couldn't understand why I kept trying to organize everyone else's lives. She laughed softly. "It turns out I've been doing it since I was 16. She told me stories I'd never heard. A father who disappeared. a mother who panicked whenever anything felt uncertain, bills stacked on the kitchen counter, constant fear. If everything was under control, I felt safe. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, so I kept trying to control people instead. For the first time, I wasn't looking at the woman who rented my house. I was looking at someone who had spent her whole life mistaking control for love. That didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped me understand it. November arrived. The porch needed repainting. Normally, Ethan would have shown up with supplies before I'd even noticed. Instead, he called. "Dad, I found a sale on paint. I thought maybe we could do it together." Together. Not for me. Not instead of me. Together. Saturday morning we started early. Halfway through, he looked at the old brass key hanging from a hook beside the back door. "You kept it." "I always will," he smiled. "I don't deserve another copy." "No." He looked away. "I know." I dipped my brush into the paint. "But someday, you might." He stopped painting. Really stopped. He didn't speak for almost a minute. Finally, he whispered, "I'll earn it." Christmas came quietly that year. The whole family gathered at my house for the first time since Linda passed away. Laughter echoed through the living room again. The boys argued over board games. Someone burned the dinner rolls. Lindsay laughed before anyone else did. After dessert, Ethan stood. "I have something." He disappeared into the hallway and returned carrying a small wooden box. "I made this." Inside was a simple brass key. Not to my house. It was mounted inside the frame beneath a small engraved plate. The engraving read, "A key opens a door. Trust opens a home." No one spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, because anything else would have made the moment smaller. Spring returned, almost exactly 1 year after strangers had walked into my kitchen. The porch swing creaked gently in the morning breeze. I was reading the newspaper when Ethan pulled into the driveway. He got out carrying 2 cups of coffee. He held one toward me. "My treat." I smiled. "You don't have to." "I know." He handed me the cup anyway. Not because he thought I couldn't buy my own. Not because he wanted to manage my life. Just because sons sometimes buy coffee for their fathers. We sat together without saying much. The maple tree was green again. The brass key rested comfortably in my pocket. Some things had changed forever. Others had simply found their way home. I looked at Ethan. "You know." "What's that?" "I'm glad you knocked." He smiled. "I always will." And somehow, those 4 quiet words meant more to me than any smart lock ever could. Even the old porch swing I'd repaired last spring. Quiet family home near downtown, 5 stars, 23 reviews. My knees suddenly felt weak. The family left 5 minutes later after apologizing at least 10 times. Before driving away, the husband rolled down his window. "I hope whoever did this gets caught." So did I. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I sat on my front porch holding my house key. Linda always said that key wasn't just metal. It's proof we're home. After she died 3 years earlier, I carried it everywhere. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching into my pocket just to feel it was still there. I needed that feeling now, because nothing else made sense. My son Ethan lived 20 minutes away, 38 years old, married, 2 boys. Every Sunday dinner happened at their place, every birthday, every Thanksgiving. He still called me Dad. I still believed that meant something. About 6 months earlier, he'd offered to help me after I mentioned I was tired of mowing the lawn. "Dad, you should make the house work for you." I laughed. "The house has been working for me since 1992. He smiled. "I'm serious." Then he suggested installing smart locks, security cameras, a keypad instead of spare keys. "It'll be safer." It sounded reasonable. He handled everything. Downloaded apps, created passwords, installed cameras, changed locks. "I'll keep backup access in case something happens." I thanked him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. Now I walked back inside and looked at the keypad beside my front door. I suddenly realized I didn't even know the administrator password anymore. I called Ethan. He answered immediately. "Hey, Dad. I just had strangers inside my house." Silence. Not confusion. Silence. Then he asked one question. "They actually went inside?" My stomach tightened. "What do you mean, actually?" Another pause. Then he sighed. "Dad." Something about that sigh made me feel older than 72. I was going to tell you. My grip tightened around the phone. "Tell me what?" "They weren't supposed to arrive until next weekend." I didn't speak. I couldn't. Because only one explanation fit that sentence. He knew exactly why strangers had shown up. And when he finally spoke again, everything I believed about my family began to change. "They weren't supposed to arrive until next weekend." I stood in the middle of my living room, staring at the family photographs on the mantel. "Ethan," I said quietly, "start from the beginning." He let out a long breath. "It isn't what you think." "I don't even know what I'm supposed to think." "They only rent the guest room." I looked toward the hallway. "The guest room?" "Most of the time." "Most of the time." "Not never." "Not that's impossible." "Most of the time." I closed my eyes for a second. "You've been renting my house?" "We were trying to help." That sentence landed harder than anything else. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I made a mistake." We were trying to help. Who is we? Lindsay and me. My daughter-in-law. Of course. "We'll come over tonight," Ethan said. "We'll explain everything." I ended the call before he finished. I spent the afternoon walking through every room. Nothing looked different. The same faded recliner. The same grandfather clock. Linda's china cabinet. Her cookbook still sitting open on the kitchen shelf. Yet somehow the whole house felt unfamiliar. Then I noticed something I had never paid attention to before. A small black camera above the hallway. I remembered Ethan installing it. Just for security. I walked underneath it. Was it recording? Who could see it? Did someone watch me making coffee every morning? Did strangers know when I left the house? The thought made my skin crawl. Around 6 that evening, Ethan and Lindsay pulled into the driveway. They looked nervous. Lindsay carried a peach pie. She always brought dessert when conversations were going to be uncomfortable. Linda used to notice that. "If Lindsay shows up with pie," she'd whisper, "brace yourself." She had been right more often than not. We sat around the kitchen table. Nobody touched the pie. Ethan finally spoke. "Dad, we never meant to hurt you. You charged strangers to stay in my house. They only used the upstairs. I live downstairs." "I know. You didn't think that mattered?" He rubbed both hands together. "We thought you'd enjoy having people around." I stared at him. "You thought I'd enjoy waking up to strangers?" "No." "Then what exactly did you think?" He couldn't answer. Lindsay stepped in. The extra income helps. My income? Our income. Those two words stopped the room. Our income. I repeated them slowly. My house. My property. My electricity. My insurance. My memories. How exactly did it become our income? She looked genuinely confused. We're family, I nodded once. So was Linda. Silence. After a minute, Ethan spoke again. We've been putting the money aside. For me? He hesitated. For future expenses. What expenses? You know? No, Ethan. I don't know. He looked toward Lindsay before answering. In case you eventually need assisted living. There it was. Not today. Not tomorrow. Eventually. They had already planned for a future I had never discussed. After they left, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I made coffee. The house was perfectly quiet. Then curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop, typed my address into a search engine. Nothing. Then I searched nearby vacation rentals. Dozens appeared. Cabins, apartments, lake houses, and then my porch. My own front porch. There it was. Professional photographs. Brighter than real life. The listing called it Charming Historic Home Hosted by Ethan. Hosted by Ethan, not by me. I kept scrolling. There were pictures of the guest bedroom, the upstairs bathroom, the backyard, the porch swing, even my kitchen. My kitchen. Someone had photographed it while I wasn't home. Then I reached the reviews. The homeowner keeps to himself. Saw the older gentleman once. Very friendly. Felt like staying with someone's grandfather. My heart dropped. They weren't renting an empty house. They were renting me as part of the experience. The next morning, I drove to my friend Frank's hardware store. Frank had known me for nearly 30 years. He looked up and smiled. Morning, Charlie. Morning. We talked about lawn fertilizer for a few minutes before he asked something that caught me completely off guard. So, how's the rental business going? I stopped walking. What rental business? He laughed. Ethan said your place has become pretty popular online. The world seemed to go strangely quiet. He told you that? Sure. Frank shrugged. Said it keeps you busy since Linda passed. Busy. I forced a smile. I guess that's one way to describe it. I bought nothing. Just drove home. On the way, one thought refused to leave me. If Frank knew, who else knew? That Sunday, after church, 3 different people stopped me. One couple asked whether tourists were respectful. Another asked if I'd recommend listing their own house. An older woman smiled. I think it's wonderful your son found a way for you to stay active. I smiled politely. Inside, something was breaking. Without ever asking me, my own son had created a new version of my life, and everyone else believed it. That afternoon, I sat on the porch with Linda's old house key in my hand. I turned it over and over between my fingers. The key no longer fit the new electronic lock Ethan had installed. It couldn't even open my own front door anymore. That's when I realized something that frightened me more than the online listing. If my old key no longer worked, how many other people had keys that did? Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Smart Lock app. New administrator added successfully. I never added anyone. Yet somehow, someone else had just been given complete control of the locks on my house. I stared at the notification for several seconds. New administrator added successfully. I hadn't touched the app. I hadn't even opened it in months. I tapped the notification. Access denied. I tried again. The same message appeared. You do not have permission to manage this property. I read it 3 times. This property. Not your home. Not your account. Just this property. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being the owner, at least in the system Ethan had built. I called him immediately. He answered with his usual cheerful voice. Hey, Dad. I just got a notification. A pause. What notification? Someone became administrator of my house. Another pause. Longer this time. Oh. Oh. Ethan. I was going to explain. I've heard that sentence before. It was only temporary. Who has control of my locks? He hesitated. Lindsay. I closed my eyes. Why? She manages the reservations. Reservations. He said it as casually as someone talking about grocery shopping. I never agreed to any reservations. I know. You knew. I thought you'd understand. No. I don't. After hanging up, I drove to the locksmith who had installed the original deadbolt years ago. The owner, Mike, still remembered me. Charlie, haven't seen you in a while. I need some advice. He listened carefully while I explained everything. When I finished, he leaned back. So your son installed a smart lock? Yes. And he controls the administrator account? Apparently. Mike scratched his chin. Then you're not really in control of who enters your own house. Those words settled heavily between us. He wasn't being dramatic. He was simply stating a fact. That afternoon, I stopped by my attorney's office. His name was Richard Palmer. He had handled Linda's will years earlier. He smiled when I walked in. Charlie, I wish this were a social visit. An hour later, every printed screenshot from the rental listing lay across his desk. He examined each one carefully. Finally, he looked up. Did you authorize your son to rent the property? No. Did you sign a property management agreement? No. Did you receive any of the rental income? No. He folded his hands. I don't want to jump to conclusions. Neither did I. But I do want answers. Richard nodded. So do I. He gave me one piece of advice. Don't confront them again. I already have. Not anymore. Why? Because people reveal more when they think nothing has changed. That sounded familiar. Linda used to say almost the same thing. Truth gets impatient before lies do. For the next week, I said almost nothing. Every Sunday dinner stayed exactly the same. The boys talked about baseball. Lindsay brought dessert. Ethan asked if I needed help with the yard. I smiled. Everything's fine. It wasn't. But they believed me. And because they believed me, they became careless. 3 days later, my grandson Noah called. He was 13, old enough to notice things adults ignored. Grandpa? Hey, buddy. Can I ask you something? Always. Dad said you're moving. I nearly dropped the phone. What? He told Mom we're probably fixing up your house before winter. I kept my voice steady. Did he say where I'm moving? No. He just said it'll be easier for everybody. Everybody. That word again. Not easier for me. Everybody. That evening I drove through my neighborhood. Nothing had changed. Kids rode bicycles, dogs barked, sprinklers clicked across green lawns. When I reached my driveway, I noticed a silver SUV parked outside. A young couple stood on my porch. The woman was taking pictures. I walked toward them. Can I help you? The man smiled. We're checking out the neighborhood. For what? We're staying here next month. He pointed at my house. My wife wants to know where we should park. I felt my stomach tighten. Who told you you'd be staying here? Our host. He showed me the reservation. 4 nights. Starting in 3 weeks. The reservation had already been confirmed. No one had asked me. No one had even told me. That night I couldn't stop thinking about Linda. She had loved ordinary things. Fresh coffee, Sunday mornings, the smell of rain on the porch. She believed a home wasn't valuable because of its price. It was valuable because people felt safe inside it. For the first time since she died, I didn't feel safe in ours. The next morning, Richard called. I found something. What is it? The rental listing isn't the only issue. My grip tightened on the phone. What else? I checked county records. And? Your mailing address hasn't changed. That's good. Yes. He paused. But your emergency contact has, I frowned. So? It isn't unusual. What worries me, he took a slow breath, is that every emergency notification now goes to Ethan first. I said nothing. Richard continued. If someone called about your property, they'd speak to him. If the security company received an alert, they'd call him. If something happened to you inside that house, he would likely be notified before anyone else. I looked across the living room. Linda's favorite rocking chair sat exactly where she'd left it. Nothing had moved. Yet somehow, my entire life had quietly shifted into someone else's hands. Then Richard said the sentence that kept me awake all night. Charlie, I think your son has been preparing to manage your life, long before he ever rented your house. Richard's words stayed with me for the rest of the week. I think your son has been preparing to manage your life. Not steal it. Manage it. That difference mattered. If Ethan wanted my money, I could almost understand the motive. Greed is ugly, but it's simple. This was something else. He honestly believed he knew what was best for me. That frightened me even more. The following Monday, Richard invited me back to his office. When I arrived, a thick blue folder was waiting on the conference table. We're not building a case against your son, he said. We're documenting your wishes. I appreciated that. There is a difference. One is about revenge. The other is about dignity. We spent nearly 3 hours updating everything. My will, my medical directives, my property records. Most importantly, we removed every digital authorization Ethan had ever received. Then Richard suggested something I hadn't expected. Replace every smart device. The locks, the cameras, the garage opener, the alarm system. Everything connected to your home. I nodded. It felt strange. Not because I was changing technology, because I was taking my house back one small decision at a time. 2 weeks later, Mike installed a traditional deadbolt again. He handed me 2 brass keys, just like the old days. I smiled. One key stayed in my pocket. The second went into Linda's old ceramic bowl beside the front door, exactly where she'd always kept it. For the first time in months, I felt like I belonged inside my own home again. That Friday, I invited Ethan and Lindsay to dinner. Nothing unusual: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, apple pie. When they arrived, Ethan smiled. You seem happier. I am. We ate almost the entire meal talking about Noah's baseball season and little Ben learning to ride a bike. No arguments, no tension. After dessert, I carried a small folder into the dining room. Ethan looked at it. What's that? My decisions. He frowned. What do you mean? I sat down. I've changed my estate plan. Neither of them spoke. I've also removed every digital authorization connected to my house. Lindsay's face changed immediately. You? What? I own the house. Charlie, we were only helping. I know. You didn't have to do this. I did. Ethan leaned forward. Dad, why didn't you just talk to us? I looked at him for a long moment. I did. He opened his mouth. I continued before he could answer. When strangers walked into my kitchen. When I found my house online. When I learned someone else controlled my front door. I talked. You explained. You defended. But neither of you listened. Silence settled over the room. Finally, Ethan spoke. I thought you were lonely. I was. I thought meeting people would help. You never asked. I thought the extra money could protect you later. You never asked. I thought you trusted me. I did. My voice stayed calm. So much that I handed you a key. I reached into my pocket and placed the brass key on the table. You know what this used to mean? He looked down. It meant I was always welcome. I nodded. Not control. Welcome. The room became very quiet. Lindsay wiped at her eyes. I grew up watching my grandfather lose everything to dementia. Nobody answered. She continued. My parents always said they waited too long. I promised myself I'd never make that mistake. I believed her. For the first time since all of this began, I truly believed her. You prepared for a future that hadn't happened, I said gently. She nodded. And while preparing for it, you took away the present. Tears rolled down her face. I didn't see it. I know. Ethan looked as though he hadn't slept in days. I honestly thought I was protecting you. I believe you. Those 4 words surprised him. You do? Yes. His eyes filled. But believing your intentions doesn't erase what happened. He lowered his head. No, it doesn't. I slid one final document across the table. This is the new plan. He didn't touch it. If I ever become unable to care for myself, 2 independent doctors will decide. He nodded. Not family. No. If my house is ever sold, it will happen because I chose it. Again he nodded. And until then, I rested my hand on the tabletop Linda and I had picked out almost 30 years earlier. This remains my home. 3 months passed. Trust didn't magically return. It never does. Instead, small things changed. Ethan stopped dropping by unannounced. He called first. Would this be a good time? Instead of, I'm on my way. When something around the house needed fixing, he no longer grabbed his toolbox automatically. He asked, Do you want help? Sometimes I said yes. Sometimes I didn't. Both answers were accepted. Lindsay deleted every rental listing herself. A week later, she mailed handwritten apologies to the families whose reservations had been canceled. She never asked me to read the letters. She simply told me I should have asked permission before making decisions that weren't mine to make. That was enough. One Saturday morning, Noah came over to help me paint the back fence. Halfway through, he looked at me and smiled. Dad says he finally understands why Grandma loved this place. I looked toward the maple tree Linda had planted all those years ago. So do I. Noah dipped his brush into the paint. Are you ever going to move? I smiled. One day. But not because someone else already decided. Almost a year later, I was sitting on my front porch with a cup of coffee. The same brass key rested in my pocket. A delivery driver walked up the sidewalk. He looked at the house number, then at me. "Good morning." "Morning. Beautiful place." "It is. You own it." I smiled. "I've been lucky enough to call it home for a long time." He nodded and walked back to his truck. It was such an ordinary conversation. Most people would have forgotten it before lunch. I didn't. Because for months, I hadn't felt like the owner of my own life. Now I did. Growing older doesn't mean giving away your voice. Accepting help doesn't mean surrendering your choices. The people who truly love you don't make your future without you. They sit beside you, ask what you want, and respect the answer. I slipped Linda's old brass key back into my pocket, locked my own front door, and walked into the house we had built together. Not as a guest in someone else's plans, but as the man who was finally home again.